Emily Jordan Burday, along with Lisa Burkhardt Worley, and welcome to Pop Talk, the show where you never know what topics might just pop up. Domestic violence may be more prevalent than you and I think. Did you know that 20 people per minute are abused by their intimate partner here in the United States? That equates to more than 10 million women and men in just 1 year. Well, today's guest was one of those victims, and she will share how she is helping others who have experienced domestic violence. Lisa will introduce our guest.
Thank you, Lane. I met our guest, Thasia Anne Lunger, at a conference up in Erie, Pennsylvania earlier this year. She leads a ministry called WOW, or Women of Word. She has a television show on the local Erie cable access station, CAM, and is also a poet who has published 6 poetry collections and 4 romance novels. Her most recent collection of poetry is called Subtle Shade of Bruise. Thasia is a survivor of 17 years of domestic violence. So we will talk about her story today, as well as how she is now helping others. So welcome, Thasia, to Pop Talk. I'm so glad that we met up in Pennsylvania. It was a divine appointment, that's for sure. I do want to talk to you about the work that you're doing now, but I think we need to start with your story of abuse. When you first married your husband, and when you did, you were his second wife. Did everything seem normal to you initially?
Well, first, I want to thank you both very much for having me, because getting the word out that there is life after domestic violence is very important to me. I want to throw 2 quick statistics out there. The first is every 12 seconds in these United States, a woman is beaten by her husband, boyfriend, or lover. And while I said that, another woman was beaten. And I also need to make it clear that DV can be man on woman, woman on man, or woman on woman. I have seen it all in the 30 years that I've been doing this work. So my early life was very rough. My mother contracted polio when and was diagnosed and was in the hospital for my 6th birthday. My father decided he'd had enough, so my father, her husband, abandoned her and the children and left with another man's wife and kids, never to be seen or heard of again. So due to my mother's disability, I had to help with adult chores from the time I was 6. By the time I met my abuser, I was 15 and basically running the entire household. My disabled mom had a full-time job, because back then there were no other alternatives. There weren't food stamps and all the different kinds of help that are available now. She did meet and eventually marry a really wonderful man named James. He was a great stepfather. But to answer your question, because of all that, I had no concept of what was normal, except maybe the setting on your dryer.
Oh my goodness, that makes sense, because when you don't have a pattern to follow except dysfunction.
Exactly.
Yes, I've heard this over and over and over again. So this is a hard question, but when did the abuse start and how did you get through it? And maybe tell us how long it lasted.
Yeah. Well, I started dating him. It's way too long a story to go into, but my brother is married to his sister, and we were paired up in their wedding, and that's how we met. I was 15, and he got me pregnant at 15. I admit I was a willing partner. I was, a 15-year-old girl who had a 22-year-old man paying attention to her and thought I was so lucky. Anyway, he was 22, divorced, and fresh out of the Army. And I had been trained since 6 years old to be compliant and quiet, as not to disturb my mother. So it started pretty much immediately. When you think about a 22-year-old man having sex with a 15-year-old girl, nowadays, he could go to jail.
Oh my goodness, yes.
Abuse started right away, but I didn't know that was abuse at the time. But once I was pregnant, he would do things like grab me by my real long hair and fling me against the wall and things like that.
Yeah, I was going to say it's probably a little bit of control on his part, wanting to be with a 15-year-old, figuring he could dominate and control. So you mentioned a little bit of the abuse, but can you talk about how it started and how bad it got, I guess, Thasia?
Well, it started, like I said, very early on. We got married right away because I was pregnant, and he would swing me around. The control was always complete. Back then, there weren't cell phones and things, so he would just take away. He had me way out in the country, and he would take off, and I would be alone for hours and hours and hours, pregnant, not knowing, am I going into labor? I'm like 8 months pregnant and don't know where he is. So that's all, power and control and part of the abuse. I stayed for 17 years, and I've been told over the years as I tried to help others that I was crazy. I shouldn't have done that. But I married him in the eyes of God in his childhood church. And so I felt that was that I had to stay in the eyes of God.
Yeah, so how did you get through those very difficult times of abuse?
Pray and ask God why, why me? What have I done wrong? And a statement I learned very long time ago was some of the most perfect women in the world are abused women because they're trying not to be abused again. So never listen to that stuff about she must like it, which I heard a lot, after 17 years. But I married him in the eyes of God, and I truly believed I had to stay no matter what because it was sickness and health. And obviously, he was mentally very unhealthy.
So this sounds like you were a Christian during these years. So I have a question. When did you come to know the Lord? Obviously, then your faith helped you cope. Can you kind of help share that with the listeners?
Sure. A lot of people will use that term, born again, but I don't know a single second in my whole life that I didn't know the Lord. I don't know how I learned about him so early, but I always knew I thought of him as my father. And when I would pray, I have this like vision of me going to a den door and daddy's in there really busy with books and papers all around him, but he takes a minute to put me on his knee and listen to me. And that's how I've always felt my relationship with the Lord is.
You had two sons, though. You talked about your
Yes.
kid with this man. Finally, you had the courage to escape this marriage. What was the final straw, Thasia, and how did you do it?
Well, I had been looking and studying the Bible, trying to find an out. I know that sounds terrible. I knew that cheating was an out. I knew he was never going to cheat because they're too narcissistic to take their eyes off you for a minute. The last straw for me was on this particular night, and I did leave twice and then go back because, he pulled on the heartstrings and I'm a changed man and all that. But it never lasts. And that's one thing I need people to know. It never lasts, and it's a lie, and they're going to start up the abuse again as soon as they can. But I stayed 17 years, and on the last night that I was in his house, I had been threatened with my life several times. He tried to kill me twice, but I stayed. But the night he threatened to harm our sons was the night something clicked. And I honestly felt like God just snapped the leash off my collar and let me go. I never
You
felt
know,
like after that he wanted my sons to die also.
yes, I am so glad you shared all that because that seems to be the trigger for most women. They can take
Mhm.
it, but you get near my children
Yes.
and it won't. And I want to
Yes.
share with
Yeah.
you, I'm came from a very healthy family. I'm one of 7 children. My dad made a great
Wow.
living. Um, I feel like, I had a college education and, everything. And yet I had a relationship where I was the same thing, thrown against walls.
Mm,
I would go to my chiropractor and he would kind of look at the bruises, but I'd say, yeah, I fell, on the steps, and
yes.
you just hide it. And looking
Mhm.
back, I couldn't leave
Yeah.
because of financial situations and
Right.
that type of thing. And so it's such a hard situation because if you leave, you don't have any money. And then they say they're sorry and you want to stay. And I also looked at the Bible to see what could be my way out. So everything you're saying, I totally understand. I just want you to know that. Um, people look real polished on the outside, but you
Yeah.
never know
Yes.
what pain or heartache they're going through.
Right.
Well, I want to let the listeners know that on top of everything you've been through, in 2008, you fell and suffered a brain injury, but then you prayed a special prayer. Now, did he push you to make you fall? That's my first question. And then, second, can you share with us about what happened as well as about the prayer?
Right. No, I had been out for many, many years when I fell. I actually worked for a boss who, looking back, was kind of abusive. It was a woman, but I had called that day. I was a maid, and I told her the snow is waist deep. They did not shovel. I'm going to have to wade through snow. I'm going to be soaking wet while I clean. She said, do it this one more time and we won't go again, which made no sense. On the way out, I could not see the steps. I was carrying my supplies. I fell and hit the back of my head on the very corner of a cement step. I should have been dead. I should have been paraplegic. I should have been brain dead. But he took care of me that day. And I remember on the way home, which I knew better than to drive home, but my brain was swelling. I didn't think, and I got in my car and drove myself home. And the whole way across town, I remember I kept saying, please don't take my creativity. Please don't take my creativity. Because I knew I was, I'm walking, talking, driving. So I knew that part was okay, but I was terrified of losing my creativity, which is a gift from God. And I know that.
Yeah,
I've always known that.
which you did not lose. Can you talk about the brain damage? How did you know you were brain damaged?
Well, it started to swell once I got home. And for months, there were periods of time where I literally held my head because it felt so heavy it was going to fall over. I had all the brain scans done and all that. There was damage to the veins going up into my head. There was damage to the muscles. The doctor said it was a miracle that the muscles didn't rip away from my skull from the way I fell. So I felt blessed right from that night. I have never said, woe is me, never. I just, I will heal from this. And I also felt God was releasing me from that job because there were requirements in that job that I could not do after the brain injury. I couldn't lift my head and crawl around the scrubbed floors. So I felt like God did that so that I didn't have to do that job anymore. And that's when somebody got me to apply and go back to college.
Wow. And so that recovery took a while. And in
Yes.
fact, you're really not totally recovered yet. Is that true?
Right. Right. I'm not like I was, but I'm so much better than I was after the fall.
And as you said, God did not take your creativity away. You created your ministry, which is called WOW, like the name.
Yeah.
Stands for Women of Word. And you've written poetry and a number of books. Why don't you start with how WOW got started and how you're helping others?
Sure. So after the brain injury, and I couldn't do either of my two jobs at the time. So I saw in the paper there was this poetry group meeting at a local bookstore. So I went there, started making friends and reading my domestic violence poetry, which I had written after I escaped. And I used that poetry with a local shelter and helped them also to talk to their women and so on. But this particular night, a woman walked up to the mic and said, because Thasia read domestic violence poetry last week, I want to read one of mine. And when she read it, I felt like it was in a conversation with the poem I had read. So I kind of tucked that away. And a few weeks later, somebody read a poem about losing their infant son. And I've lost a 26-year-old son. And they felt like they were speaking together. The age difference between the children did not matter. So I ruminated on that, and I got a few of my really close women poets together, and they loved my idea of creating these conversations with the poems. And so the first year it was just WOW, Women of Word. By the second year, there were some poets that I know that are male that were talking about other really important subjects. And so I brought them in. So now it's called Women of Word with a few man-made words. But and they're very important. I have two soldiers that talk about PTSD and thoughts of suicide and things like that. And so now WOW covers not just domestic violence, which is a big part, but we also talk about mental illness, homelessness, drug addiction, and it's all done through poetry and dance, and it's amazing.
What a great ministry. Thanks for sharing about that.
Yes, it's your poetry is so exciting. And I actually have a question about it. But before we do, I don't want to lose the train of thought about after you left him, because that's the critical time. Most women say, well, what do? I can't leave him. So just real quick, what happened to you and your sons? How did you earn a living? And did he ever try to come back and threaten you in any way?
The one thing I knew about him was that once his first wife left, he was hot on the trail of me. So I felt like if I just laid low for a while, and it worked, it was not long, and he got somebody else pregnant. But now we're talking 30s. We're not talking 15 anymore. But so he moved on and had another family. My oldest son, before he passed away, he was 18 when his father and I split up. He went with me several times to do these talks because it was very important to him that women realize not all men are like his father and that he would never be like his father. And so I'm straying from your original question. I'm sorry, that happens to me a lot, but we did talks through the shelter. He and I talked at the shelters, and then I wrote poetry about it, which is, I claim poetry saved me because I was able to take the angst out of me and put it on paper. It was like taking out the trash. And so I teach poetry workshops on how to take out your trash.
Oh my goodness, that just ministers to my heart. I mean, God kept your creativity. You're ministering to so many people. So I see now how healing writing the poetry has been for you.
Yes.
Do you feel like reading one of your poems to our audience?
Yes, actually, I'd like to do two short ones if that was okay, because one will show what it was like in, and one will show what it's like out. Boll weevil. My soul had been pummeled like a cube steak, and any long gone ego plucked like a soup chicken. The man I carefully picked like prime cotton after weighing all the others turned into a boll weevil, feeding on me and my joy. I still look better today than I did 30 years ago when my picture license showed lifeless eyes and lackluster hair. He had had 5 divorces, 3 long gone live-ins, and is alone today, still wondering why he couldn't find a single good woman. And then the other poem is called Claw Climbing. I've been climbing and reaching for answers my whole life with raw fingers and with dead, tired feet, numb. I clawed, I scratched, with nothing left to give. I pulled one more time, heaving breath, eyes closed to rest. When I lifted lids, the vision cleared, with senses aware, I realized I am finally here.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
Great, Thasia.
It's amazing. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And let me just talk to you a little bit about your creativity. At what times do you get creative? And what would you say to our audience who says, I really have all this bottled emotion in me and I don't know how to get it out? And how, I guess, therapeutic has this been for you?
Extremely therapeutic. The other thing, when I grew up, I wanted to drum. My brother was always in a band and I wanted to drum. But my mother grew up in the Jackie Kennedy era, and she's like, girls don't drum, girls do this, girls do that. And so I let go of that dream for a long time. But I was in my 50s and I was at a coffee shop, kind of just drumming on the table. And a friend of mine dragged over a drum, and I said, oh, I can't play the drum. He said, oh, yes, you can. And so I do that a lot. I love drumming, and I feel like it just opens up a channel to God. And that's one of my ways of praising him, just giving up all the music I can to him. Also, the poetry just opens up, and to other women, I highly suggest you start writing, and it doesn't have to be a poem. It doesn't have to be a book. If you get a tablet and just write, I'm really mad today, or this was a beautiful day. The kids were good and the birds were singing. Whatever you write, just keep writing. And someday it may start coming more and more like a poem or a story. But I guarantee it will help you just to write those things out. And like I said, even if it's, I'm really mad, the kids were bad and I'm tired, then shut your book and walk away from it. But it really feels like taking the trash out. I promise.
Perfect. Yeah, I love to write. Both Lane and I are writers, and my favorite kind of writing though are devotions. I love
Yeah.
to write little blogs or devotions because it's how God is teaching me and what He's saying to me. And so when
Yes.
I do my morning quiet time, I just write down little key things that He said to me, and I think, that would make a good blog. And through that, I help other people. Right?
Right. Right.
Maybe it's a word I got, but maybe it'll be a word that'll speak to you as well. So I think what you're doing and writing the poetry, it's not only therapeutic for you, but I'm sure it is impacting so
Right.
many other people. And you've taken WOW to television on your
Yes.
local cable access station. It's called CAM up there in Erie, Pennsylvania. What kind of programs do you feature on the show? And can you give us some examples?
Well, I have 3 shows. One is called Poetry, Prose, and Personalities. That's my oldest one. And I started that because I realized what it was like when I was kind of housebound in the beginning of my brain injury. And I thought there's a lot of people that might like to go to our local art shows or music shows, but they can't, whether they're homebound or they don't have transportation. So I started going with a camera and just recording poetry readings and going to an art show and showing the art on the walls and just allowing people to enjoy that from home. This year, I started 2 shows. Both of them were very strong on my heart. I was in an anthology called 20 Lives Ignited, and it's a story of 20 women over the age of 60 who have overcome great things. And so I took that premise and I do a show called Never Quit hers, Never Quit Hers. And I talk to women that are over the age of 60 about what they've overcome and how they're doing it and enjoying life. And the last one, real quick, is just called Poetry or Poets Know It. And it's just an open mic feature where people can come in and read poetry and be recorded for posterity.
I love that. It's such an enormous amount of work and ministry
Yes.
God's given you. Well, since you started WOW, have any women reached out to you to thank you for helping them? And what has the response been? I'm assuming very strongly.
Yes. I also, when I hooked up with the local shelter, I was their education department for 8 years. So I would go into schools and do my warning sign list that I created and then tell my story and do the statistics. And so many times over the years, kids came up to me like in the grocery store or one time at a graduation party to say, I took your warning signs list and I helped my mom get away from dad. Or another time it was like, we took your warning signs list to my sister and we got her away from her bad boyfriend. So I know that part works. And then at WOW, I've had people come up and say, I wasn't sure if it was abuse, but after tonight, I feel like I know it's abuse. Or somebody came to me once and said, I've been struggling and wondering if I have depression. And tonight you did that thing on depression, and I really feel like maybe I do. And what I try to do is either on the back of the program are the names and numbers for those help, or I have those agencies actually in the audience so afterwards they can talk to them.
Wow, you're very organized. If you have a brain injury, I can't tell. I mean, it's just amazing how much you're doing and the kind of work you're doing. And so you're doing great work, Thasia. And we're just so happy that you've shared all this on Pop Talk. Again, I'm glad we ran into each other and met at Erie, Pennsylvania. And this is just another example of how God can work good out of something that really
Right.
was very bad. Sometimes we feel alone in scenarios like this, but we have to trust that He sees all and that He will restore anything that is broken. He's done that in your life, and Lane and I have experienced the same thing. So we're just so happy that you are helping many, many other women. That's our heart as well. If you want to reach out to Thasia, you can go straight to her website. It is thasiaanne.com. I'm going to spell that for you. It's THASIAANNE.com.
Yes, thank you so much, Thasia. And I agree with Lisa. We are so grateful to God that you made it out of that abusive relationship alive. And wow, look what the Lord is doing for you, using you powerfully. Well, Pearls of Promise came about because we care so much about women. Women who have sand in their life and they turn it into a pearl. And that's the reason we air shows like this, to help women who might be trying to overcome something like domestic violence. We would love for you to reach out to us today. You can email us at info@pearlsofpromiseministries.com. We'd love for you to like us on Facebook and follow us on X at Pop Talk Media or at Pearls of Promise. And we are on Instagram at pop_ministries.
And you'll want to check out all of our Pop Talk TV shows, podcasts, and award-winning documentaries on our YouTube channel at Pearls of Promise. So that is Pop Talk for today. We're just ordinary girls
Who God turned into pearls. Have a great week.